Avatu sahano bhunaktu sahaviryam karavavahai tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim chaiva tato daimudiraye. Om. Good. Welcome back. We begin today a new section of the Mahabharata. We're still in the fifth book, the Udyoga Parva. Udyoga means effort. In this case, preparations. Udyoga Parva are the preparations for the battle. The battle begins with the next book, the sixth book, Bhishma Parva, I think. Here in the Udyoga Parva, we're going to see, starting today, a fairly well-known section known as the Sanatsujatiya. It's named after the Rishi, Sanatsujata. And this section goes for about 6 chapters. And it has lots of very profound, clear Vedantic teachings in this particular section. Because of the Vedantic teachings that are found so clearly expressed here, this section tends to be excerpted for independent study, as the Bhagavad Gita, because of its Vedantic content, is excerpted and studied. In the same way, the Sanatsujatiya is excerpted and studied. In fact, you get a little feeling for it if we understand that Sri Shankaracharya wrote commentaries on 3 portions of the Mahabharata. The best known, of course, is the Bhagavad Gita. He also wrote a commentary, or at least these commentaries are attributed to him. They're by some Shankaracharya. We don't know if it's Adi Shankaracharya. But we find Shankara Bhasha, his commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita, on the Vishnu Sahasranama, which comes much later in the Mahabharata, and on this Sanatsujatiya. So the fact that we have Shankara's commentary on this particular section also shows its importance or status for those who study Advaita Vedanta in particular. Just a comment on the name, Sanatsujatiya. By the laws of Sanskrit grammar, if some of you know the formation of tadhitas, nominal derivatives, that which comes from Sanatsujata grammatically should be Sanatsujatiya. But it's always Sanatsujata. I have no idea why. It's a grammatical irregularity. Even though grammatically it should be Sanatsujatiya, I've never seen it that way. So Sanatsujatiya is what we call it. It is the portion that comes from the Rishi, Sanatsujata. Who is Sanatsujata? We'll give you some more background on him in just a minute. But just in general, most of you know that in Hindu mythology, from Lord Brahma, God as creator, came 4 Manasa Putra. Putra, son, but Manasa, which means not born with a wife, these are sons who came from Lord Brahma's mind. There were 4 of them. The Sanatsujata was one of those 4. Again, we'll give you more details when we get into it. And they're distinguished by several features. The 4 mind-born sons of Brahma. One is they were enlightened from birth. Unusual, to say the least, but coming from this, and this is the mythology, so please don't distinguish mythology with history. This is not a history lesson. This is Hindu mythology. So according to the mythology, these 4 sons come from the mind of Lord Brahma. They come fully enlightened, and they remain as youths. They never grow old. They remain as children. I don't know, maybe 12 years of age or something, not a tiny child, but they remain young throughout their lives. They don't age. And we'll see more about them in just a minute. By way of introduction, we just finished Vidura Niti. This section really continues in the same context. So in Vidura Niti, the section we just concluded, Vidura was telling all different stories and teachings to the blind king Dhritarashtra to comfort him at his time of sleeplessness. So Dhritarashtra is sleepless and worried because he knows the war is about to take place, and he also knows that his 100 sons will perish in that war. In fact, he's been told so by Vyasa. I forget exactly where it comes in the story. At some point in the story, Vyasa shows up and informs the king, all of your sons, all 100 of your sons are going to perish on the battlefield. King Dhritarashtra is obviously very disturbed. And Vidura, in the middle of the night, has been summoned to Dhritarashtra's chambers. And Vidura has been talking to Dhritarashtra, trying to give him some comfort. In that context, Vidura sees Dhritarashtra's deep-seated worry. Vidura knows that this great Rishi, Sanatsujata, could definitely help address Dhritarashtra's worries. And we'll see in the opening section, Vidura summons this great Rishi to come to the palace. That's the opening scene, and we'll see that as we proceed. Okay, let's begin. Vidurovacha, Vidurova, Dhritarashtra Kumharo Vai, Dhritarashtra Kumhar. Yah Purana Sanatanaha, Yah Purana Sanatsujata Provacha, Sanatsujata Pro Mrityurnasti ti Bharata, Mrityurnasti ti Bharata. Excuse me. Dhritarashtra, O king, Kumara Vai, there was a youth, a Kumara, Yaha, who was Puranaha, ancient, an ancient youth. Now, ancient youth doesn't mean he lived long ago. He's still alive. A youth who's ancient means a youth who has been living for hundreds and thousands of years, but who remains a youth. This is one of the Manasaputras. His name here is referred to as Sanatana. So now we have a little confusion because he is referred to, you'll see in the next line, Sanatsujata. So he is Sanatsujata. He is also Sanatana. There's some confusion about his name. Yes. In fact, even the commentators have some confusion about his name. Let me share this with you. I don't know if you'll find, I think it's interesting. Sanandana. So the 4 mind-born sons, Manasaputra, of Brahma, there are 4 known as Sanaka, Sanandana, I'm missing one. Sanatana. And Sanat Kumara. So, the first thing we can observe is that all of the names begin with Sana, which is why they're called, in Sanskrit, they're not called the four sons, they're called the 4 sanas. We see this reference to Chatusana, the 4 sanas. So they're all referred to this because their names begin with Sana. By the way, if you look at Dakshina Murti Shiva, the Murti on our altar, you look closely at the base of the Murti, you can make out 4 rishis carved in the base. Guess who those 4 rishis are? Sanaka, Sanandana, Sanatana, and Sanat Kumara. Those are the 4 Manasaputras. So according to the mythological story, Lord Shiva comes as Dakshinamurti Shiva for the sake of imparting Vedic wisdom for the very first time in this cycle of creation. And how does he do so? He sits at the foot of a tree, and around him gathers these 4 particular rishis, known as the 4 sanas. And it's those 4 rishis who receive the Vedic teachings from Lord Shiva's Dakshinamurti. 4 rishis, 4 Vedas. The symbolism is pretty obvious. Okay, having said that, you see one problem we have? Where is Sanatsujata in this list? Well, there's some hints here in this verse. First of all, it uses the word Kumara, so maybe he's referring to Sanat Kumara. But then there's also the word Sanatana, maybe he's referring to Sanatana. So Sanatsujata is one of these. Which one? Well, could be Sanat Kumara or could be Sanatana. Turns out that the commentaries are not in agreement on this. Shankara says that Shankara says that the one referred to, by the way, throughout this chapter, he's referred to as Sanatsujata, not part of our list. But according to Shankaracharya, Sanatsujata refers to Sanat Kumara, according to Shankara. But according to Nilakanta, who's written the main commentary on the whole Mahabharata, Nilakanta says it refers to Sanatana, which is also mentioned in this. Anyway, the point I'm making, if commentators can't agree on who it is, why should we get involved in the argument? Who cares? Let them argue. We don't care. All we know is he's referred to as Sanatsujata. Sujata literally means well-born, the one who is well-born from Lord Brahma. So, he's known as Sanatana, he's known as Sanat Kumara, he is Kumara and Purana. He is an ancient boy, which means he's a child who doesn't grow old. And in the third line, throughout this chapter, throughout this whole 6-chapter section, he'll be referred to as Sanatsujata. And Provacha, he said, according to Vidura is quoting him, quoting the fact that Sanatsujata said, Mrityuhu nasti, death doesn't exist. Iti Bharata, O king, thus said Sanatsujata, death does not exist. Now, this is really important in context. What do you think is one of the main reasons for Dhritarashtra's sleeplessness, anticipating the death of his 100 sons? By the way, and just on a little heavy note, we have, almost all of us, have had the experience of holding vigil, is the word they use in English, which means waiting as a loved one dies or prepares to die. We know what that's about. And you know how difficult that can be. So if you are waiting for your loved one to die, that's extraordinarily painful and difficult. Here, Dhritarashtra is holding vigil, waiting for not a loved one to die, 100 sons to die. Your grief times 100 is the grief that Dhritarashtra is experiencing here, based on the imminent death of his sons. So Vidura knows that this is an issue. Death is an issue for Dhritarashtra. Interestingly enough, Dhritarashtra is not worried about his own death, as many people aren't. I find that really highly instructive, that so many people are not concerned particularly about their own deaths, but they most certainly are concerned about the deaths of their loved ones, as is Dhritarashtra. Knowing this, Vidura addresses the issue of death by bringing up these teachings of Sanatsujata, who taught Mrityuhu Nasti, death does not exist. Vidura continues to explain. Sate guhyan prakashanscha, sate guhyan prakash, sarvan hridaya samshrayan, sarvan hridaya pravakshyati maharaja, pravakshyati maha, sarva buddhimatam varaha, sarva buddhimatam. Let's see these lines in reverse order. Start with the last line. Vidura refers to Sanatsujata as calling him Sarva Buddhimatam Varaha. Vara, the best. The best of what? Buddhimatam. The best of the intelligent. Sarva, all of them. The best of all who are wise. This Sanatsujata. Pravakshyati Maharaja. Maharaja, O king. This Sanatsujata, who is the wisest of the wise, he, pravakshati, he can tell you, O King Dhritarashtra, he can tell you what? Sarvan, everything. Everything what? Hridaya samshrayan, all of the matters of the heart. Nice expression. Hridaya samshrayan sarvan, all matters of the heart. Matters of the heart which are both guhyan and prakashan. Matters of the heart, some of which are guhya, hidden, secret, some of which are prakasha, well known. So all of the problems that matters of the heart means, I guess it's an expression for troubles, things that trouble us. Some things that trouble us we hold in secret and we share with no one. Some things that trouble us we share with others. Things that trouble us that we hold inside are guhya. Things that trouble us that we share with others are prakasha. So with regard to all of these matters, sarvan, which are hridaya samshrayan, all of these troubles in our heart, Vidura says that this wisest of the wise, pravakshati, and you have to connect it to te in the first line. He can tell you, O king, he can solve your problems, he can address your troubles. This great Rishi, Sanatsujata. Now, we pop out of the story to the narration. All of this, of course, you recall, is narrated by the disciple of Vyasa, known as Vaishampayana. Vaishampayana is a senior disciple of Vyasa, and Vaishampayana is narrating all of this to King Janamejaya. Vaishampayano vacha, Vaishampayano vacha, chintayamasa viduras, chintayama tam rishim samshitavratam, tam risha sachat Tachintitam yatva sacha tachintitam darshayamasa bharata darshayamasa. So Vaishampayana is narrating what happens next. What happens next is Vidura. What does he do? Chintayamasa. He meditates upon tam rishim, on that rishi. He meditates upon Sanatsujata, who is samshita vratam, the one whose vows are firm and clear, this very saintly Rishi, Sanatsujata. So Vidura meditates on him. Where is Sanatsujata? He's Brahma's Manasaputra. He is a Devarshi. He's a Rishi who's a Deva. He's not they're not human beings. They're godly Rishis, divine Rishis. Where do they live? I guess wherever they want to. in the heavens someplace or another, we don't know. So Vidura meditates upon Sanatsujata, and Saha, he, Sanatsujata, Jnatva, knowing tat chintatam, knowing he's being meditated upon by Vidura. So the Manasaputra of Brahma, these are not ordinary beings, all siddhis they have. So he knows that Vidura is meditating upon him, he is aware of that, and therefore what does he do? Darshayamasa, he reveals himself there at the palace. So at the palace, Vidura and King Dhritarashtra are in King Dhritarashtra's chambers. And as they're having this long discussion, which began chapters back with Vidura Niti, now in this section, Vidura merely meditates on Sanatsujata, and Sanatsujata manifests himself in their presence. It must be very, very dramatic part of the story, where suddenly this great Rishi is summoned by Vidura, and he appears. And Vidura then addresses Sanatsujata. Viduruvacha, Bhagavan samshaya kaschata, Bhagavan samshaya, Dhritarashtrasya manase, Dhritarashtrasya, Yo na shakyo maya vaktum, Yo na shakyo maya, Tamasmai vaktum arhasi, Tamasmai vaktum arhasi. Actually, there's continuous 6 lines here. Yam shrutva yam manushendraha, Yam shrutva yam manushen, Sukha dukkati go bhavet, Sukha dukkati go. Good. Some verses have an extra line. So he addresses Vidura, addresses the great Rishi, Sanatsujata, who has just appeared there in his midst. And Vidura says, Hey Bhagavan, O Lord, Kaschit samshaya, some doubt is manase, in the mind of Dhritarashtrasya, of Dhritarashtra. So in Dhritarashtra's mind, there is Kaschit samshaya, some doubt, a doubt which nashakya maya vaktum, yaha, a doubt which nashakya maya, I am not able, vaktum, I'm not able to clear that doubt. I'm not able to address a particular doubt in King Dhritarashtra's mind, in particular a doubt or concern or trouble about death. It's not said in this verse, but the context is very clear. Vidura, throughout that Vidura Niti section, has not been able to fully comfort Dhritarashtra. He's still very upset. He's still sleepless. He didn't fall asleep. Vidura is still standing there and talking to him. So Vidura recognizes he's not yet been able to answer Dhritarashtra's troubles about death. And so Vidura requests of Sanatsujata, asmai, unto him, unto the king, tam vaktum arhasi, please tell him, please address the king's doubt, please help the king by addressing his concern about death. And the verse concludes, Yam shrutva, having heard this teaching from you, Manusyendraha, this great king, king of men. Indra here means king, not Indra, the king of the gods, but Indra here means king. So Manusya Indra, the Indra of people, means the king of people, king. So this Ayam Manusyendraha, this great king, Yam Shutva, having heard your instructions, Sukha dukkha atigaha bhavet. He might become Sukha dukkha atika. Atiga, one who has gone beyond, one who has transcended. Transcended what? Sukha and dukkha. To transcend sukha and dukkha means to be able to handle death. That's the context. So with the help of Vidura tells Sanatsujata, with the help of your instruction, your teachings, King Dhritarashtra can transcend happiness and grief, and he can be reconciled with the upcoming death, with the imminent death of all his family members. The narration, I should say the narrator continues, Vaishampayano vacha, Vaishampayano. And now we have the longer meter. Tato raja dhritarashtro manishi, Tato raja dhritarashtro mani, Sampujya vakyam vidureritam tata, Sanatsujatam rahite mahatma, Sanatsujatam rahite mahat, papracha buddhim paramam bhubhushan, papracha buddhim paramam bhubhushan. So Vaishampayana is narrating this. So he says that tataha, then Raja Dhritarashtra, the king Dhritarashtra, who is called here Manishi, wise. It's a little debatable. The term wise used here as a matter of respect. So the narrator, Vaishampayana, wants to show respect to the king, so he refers to the king as being wise. The behavior of Dhritarashtra reveals him to be otherwise. Right? Okay. So, King Dhritarashtra, Sampujya, having worshipped, having formally greeted and worshipped and saluted Sanatsujata. Go down to the last line. He papracha, he asked. What did he ask? Go up to, by the way, this verse is all jumbled. We have to jump around. Papracha, he asked. What did he ask? Second line. Vakyam vidura iritam tat. He asked tat, that, vakyam, that statement, which was vidura iritam, referred to by Vidura. What was the statement referred to by Vidura? Mrityuhu nasti. Death does not exist. That is a statement which is Vidura irita. So Vidura said that Sanatsujata said that death did not exist. So with regard to Tatvakyam, whatever Vidura said, whatever he quoted, the king, papracha, he asked Sanatsujata, and where did, in the third line, prapacha, he asked whom? Third line, Sanatsujatam. He asked Sanatsujata, where? Rahate, in private. In a private place. And private means in his own chambers. In the presence of Vidura, he asked Sanatsujata, and why? Why did Raja Dhritarashtra, why did the king ask? Well, there are several hints here. One is he's called Mahatma. Boy, Vaishampayana is really working hard to be respectful of the king. So this Mahatma, this great-souled person, the king who was bhubhushan, he was desiring to understand paramam buddhim, this highest teaching. Paramam buddhi, here buddhi means teaching. He wanted to understand this highest teaching that Vidura had quoted. Vidura quoted Sanatsujata as saying, Mrityuhu nasti, death does not exist. And having told that to King Dhritarashtra wanted to understand this highest teaching, and Dhritarashtra asked, Dhritarashtra Vacha. And continuing in a long line. Sanatsujata yaridam shrunomi. Sanatsujata yaridam. And it's a typo, not yadidam, yadidam. Mrityur nasti titavopadesham. Mrityur nasti titavopadesham. Deva sura hyacharan brahmacharyam. Deva sura hyacharan brahmachar. Amrityave tat kataran nu satyam. Amrityave tat kataran nu satyam. So here, King Dhritarashtra addresses him, O Sanatsujata, yadidam shrunomi. That which I heard, what did I hear? Mrityuhu hi nasti, that death does not exist. This iti, thus, tava upadesham, your teaching. Tava, your, upadesham, your teaching. What teaching? Mrityuhu nasti, death does not exist. And Dhritarashtra says, yat idam shrunomi, I heard this. I heard your teaching from Vidura. I heard that you teach that death does not exist. However, Dhritarashtra has also heard another teaching, another story. And he refers to that story in the next line. He says, Deva asuraha hi brahmacharyam acharan. He says, he's referring to a story in which the devas, the gods, and the asuras, the demons, were acharan, practicing brahmacharyam, practicing spiritual austerities and celibacy. What for? Amrityave, for the sake of becoming free from mrityu, to become deathless, to become immortal. So notice the conflict in Dhritarashtra's mind. He knows that Sanatsujata says death does not exist, but Dhritarashtra's thinking about this story in which the gods and the devas were seeking deathlessness through spiritual practice. You see the conflict here. Sanatsujata says there is no death. So if there is no death, what are these gods and demons doing spiritual practice for? If there's no such thing as death, why are they bothering with these spiritual practices? And I want to tell you the story, but let's just finish the verse. So this confusion is in King Dhritarashtra's mind. So he says, Tat kataran, which of these two, nu satyam, which of these two is correct? Which is correct? That death doesn't exist, or that death is overcome through spiritual practice? He makes reference to this story. It's a famous story. Allow me to share it with you. By the way, the story comes from the Chandogya Upanishad. In fact, it comes from Chandogya Upanishad, chapter 8, which is part of our study for next year's Vedanta class. So starting in our Tuesday Vedanta class next fall, we're going to study Chandogya Upanishad, chapters 6, 7, and 8, which includes this. It's really a great story. Let me tell it to you briefly. So the story goes that Prajapati, by the way, is often the same as Brahma. So Prajapati or Brahma, take your choice, is teaching what? Prajapati teaches Atma is vimrityu. That's the word he uses in the Upanishad. Vimrityu means without mrityu, without death. So this Prajapati is teaching that Atma doesn't die. Atma is without death. And it turns out that this teaching goes around, I guess, people talk. So somehow this teaching gains. There's a nice American expression when something is said and it spreads out. They say it grows legs. The teaching grows some legs and travels out to the extent that both the devas and the asuras, they hear this teaching. The devas hear that Prajapati teaches there is no death. The asuras hear that Prajapati teaches there is no death. And both the devas and asuras are interested to get this teaching. Problem is, Prajapati lives in an ashram someplace. And in order to get this teaching, you're going to have to go and become the disciple of Prajapati. Otherwise, a guru will only teach a disciple. If somebody is just casually walking around, the guru is not going to teach. So only a qualified disciple would be taught by Prajapati. The devas and the asuras both want to find out what is Prajapati's teaching on the absence of death. So they each elect one of their own to go and become a disciple of Prajapati. And who do they elect? They elect their leaders. So the head of the devas is Indra. The head of the asuras is Virochana. Indra is the leader of the asuras, of the devas, and Virochana is the leader of the asuras, the demons. And they both show up at Prajapati's ashram for the sake of studying. And the story goes, they show up as proper brahmacharis. They show up wearing proper, so they have to take off all of their kingly dress. And they dress in I guess, bark and skin, deer skin or whatever they dress in. They shave their heads. They show up with sacrificial twigs in hand. And they both show up at the same time, which is exceedingly awkward because they're bitter rivals. So imagine Indra and Virochana showing up at the same time at the Prajapati's ashram for the sake of learning this wisdom. These bitter rivals now have to live together and study together for a period of 32 years. This is a story. So they managed somehow to put up with each other for 32 years. They live with Prajapati and they do all the Gurukula Seva. They do the sweeping and everything. And finally, after 32 years, Prajapati says, okay, you're ready to be taught. And now comes the spiritual teachings. This all comes, I'm not making this up. This is what comes from the Chandogya Upanishad. It tells the story very nicely. So Prajapati says, the Atma that is vimrityu, without death. He uses a very odd expression. He calls it Akshi Purusha. Purusha means person, a person who is Akshi, in the eye. The person in the eye is the deathless Atma. Having been told that, both Indra and Virochana are clueless. They can't make heads or tails of that teaching. So in the next chapter then, Prajapati gives some examples, and one of the examples is he brings a bowl of water, and he asks both Indra and Prajapati to see the reflection of themselves in the bowl of water. Now, what Indra is trying to make them understand is that the deathless Atma is the one, he said, Akshi Purusha, the one behind the eye. The one who looks out through the eye, which means the seer, not the eye, this one who sees. And we finally, in Vedanta, we use the Sanskrit word sakshi. the awareful witness, pure consciousness. Sakshi, the observer of all the activities of your mind. This is what Prajapati wants to teach to Indra and Virochana. So when he calls it Akshi Purusha, they don't get it. I admit it's a little obscure. So then in his further teaching, he says, please look at your reflection. So he's hoping that Indra in his bowl of water, please look at your reflection in his bowl of water, and Prajapati is hoping that this will help both Indra and Prajapati to understand that Atma is the observer of the reflections in the waters. However, Indra and Virochana, in spite of 32 years of preparation, neither one of them got it. They both looked at their image in the water, and they see their image, and it says, "Oh, that's Atma." Atma. They're seeing their own physical forms reflected in the water. Neither one of them are understanding what Prajapati really intends to teach. They both come to the wrong conclusion that the physical body, which is seen to be reflected in the water, is the deathless Atma. Massive confusion. But they both think they're enlightened. And they're so happy. After 32 years of study, they can graduate, and they leave the ashram. And there's a really cute, if I can call it cute, a really cute part. As they're walking away from the ashram, Prajapati says to himself, they don't get it. They're blockheads. And he's kind of like complaining to himself that these guys are walking away thinking that they're enlightened when in fact they haven't understood at all. So, anyway, Virochana goes back to the Asuras and said, I have learned the secret to immortality. All the Asuras said, what did you learn from Prajapati? He says, the secret of immortality is the image that you see reflected in the water is the immortal self. God. This is what he taught. He came back to the Asuras with this completely garbled message, and he taught that to all the Asuras, and all the Asuras were delighted. They all think they're enlightened. They're all massively confused, of course. In the meanwhile, Indra, it's a nice story, isn't it? Indra is en route to the Devas, and as he's making his way back to whatever heavenly domain he is going to, en route, he's thinking and thinking and thinking, and he says, that can't possibly be right. So as he's walking, he gets more and more and more doubts, until finally he realizes, I must have misunderstood something. He turns around and he goes back. He comes to Prajapati. I didn't get it. Please teach me again. Prajapati says, okay, you have to do another 32 years of preparation. Already 32 is over. So another 32 goes. And at the end of 32 years, he gets some more spiritual instruction. And Indra again says, okay, now I got it. And off he goes. And again, Prajapati knows that he didn't quite get it. And en route, as Indra is going back to the heavens, he again is reflecting on it and says, no, that can't be right either. So he returns again. And he asks Prajapati, please tell, I didn't get it yet. Please tell me some more. And Prajapati says, okay, 32 more years. And so after the end of 32 more years, yet more teachings, yet another realization. Indra goes charging off and figures out he still doesn't get it. And comes back for the last time. It's not 32 more years, it's a few more years. I forget. Enough years to make the number 101. I forget the actual number. But his total stay with Prajapati ends up being 101 years. after 101 years, finally, Indra is led to properly understand that the consciousness by which everything is known, the consciousness by which your thoughts are known, the consciousness by which your emotions are known, the consciousness by which everything you perceive is known, that consciousness we call Sakshi, the awareful witness. That Sakshi is Vimrityu, immortal, free from death. Finally, Indra returns. He shares that message with the Devas, and the Devas really get it. The Asuras continue in delusion, and the Devas really get it. So anyway, this is the story. So you can come back next fall in our Tuesday class, and you can hear that whole story again, coming right from the Upanishad. Anyway, the reason for sharing the story is this is a story that was quoted by Dhritarashtra. So again, let's just remember Dhritarashtra's confusion. Sanatsujata says death does not exist. But then, why would the Devas and why would Indra and Virochana spend those first 32 years living a life of austerity and celibacy? He uses the word brahmacharyam. So why would they spend 32 years engaged in spiritual practice for the sake of immortality, amrityave? They spent 32 years of spiritual practice for the sake of immortality, and this doesn't fit for Dhritarashtra. Sanatsujata says death doesn't exist, but Indra and Virochana both spent 32 years engaged in spiritual practice for the sake of immortality. If death doesn't exist, then what did they do for those 32 years? That's what's in Dhritarashtra's mind. Therefore, he asked Sanatsujata, Tat katharannu satyam. Which of these two is correct? And we get the reply. Sanatsujata vacha, Sanatsujata. Now we have the shorter meter. Amrityu karmana kechan, amrityu karmana mrityur nastiti chapare, mrityur nastiti. Shunu me bruvato rajan, shunu me bruvato. Yathaitan ma vishankitaha, yathaitan ma vishankitaha. Kechan is actually kechit. Some people say that amrityuhu, absence of death, immortality. Immortality is attained how? Karmana. Through karma, and here karma doesn't mean any other action, it means spiritual practice. Karma here means spiritual practice, including rituals. So karmana, through spiritual practice, including rituals, amrityuhu, immortality is obtained. Kechit, some people say that. On the other hand, at the end of the second line, apare, cha, and apare, others say what? Mrityuhu nasti, death doesn't exist. So Sanatsujata refers to these two schools of thought. Some people say that immortality is achieved through rituals and spiritual practice. Some people say that death doesn't exist. He says, Rajan, in the third line, O king, shunu me, listen to me, bruvataha, as I explain, yata etat, as I explain this as it is truly. Please listen as I explain it correctly. Ma vishankitaha, don't be confused. Ma vishankitaha, don't be confused, don't be misled, don't misunderstand. Now, he's talking about two schools of thought. Let's examine them briefly before we continue this. So, karmana amrityuhu. let's just apply some simple principles of reasoning. Can immortality be achieved through a karma, through an action? And to analyze this, and this is a kind of analysis that's frequently done in Vedanta, we analyze what are the possible results of karma, any action. What can action accomplish? What are the possible outcomes or results of an action? Depends on the action. One result of an action is you can obtain something. So, for example, your action of getting in the car and driving here this morning, that was a karma, and through that karma, you obtained something. Another kind of karma is a transformation. I'll skip the Sanskrit words. I think it'll just be more clear. Transformation. When many of you at home, you make your own yogurt. Some of you make your own yogurt at home. So when you take that milk and you boil it and you do whatever you do to it and it becomes yogurt, did you obtain the yogurt? If you go to the store, you can obtain yogurt. But at home, what you did was you transformed milk into yogurt. So that's not obtaining something. That's a different kind of result of karma. So we're talking about different kinds. Let's put a title on this. These are different kinds of results. Phala means result. So what are the possible results of an action, of a karma? One action might be, one result is you obtain something. Another result of karma might be you transform something, as milk is transformed into yogurt. Another possibility is you can purify something. Suppose you have dirty water and you put it through some kind of filter. By putting that water through the filter, you now have clean water. Well, that clean water, you didn't really obtain it. If you go to the store and you buy a bottle of water, that's obtaining. But that's not quite what happened. Nor did you transform the water. The water was the same before and after. What you did was you removed impurities. So purification is another kind of result of action. And the final thing in this particular approach, you can destroy something through an action. So these are in a typical Vedantic analysis, they would say, with the help of karma, these are the 4 possible results of a karma. Now, the reason for this kind of analysis is now we have a tool for analysis. And we can apply this analytical tool to Atma gaining immortality. So, if Atma is mortal, notice our starting point. If Atma is mortal, this is the option. So remember the 2 possibilities. Sanatsujata said there is no death, meaning Atma is immortal. But then the other option is that immortality is achieved through karma. But we have to be very clear in our thinking. If immortality is achieved through karma, the implication is, without the karma, Atma is mortal. You follow that? If immortality is achieved through karma, that directly implies that Atma, in the absence of those actions, in the absence of that karma, Atma starts off being mortal. So, assuming that Atma is mortal, how will we make it immortal? So he says, karmana, through some kind of karma, you can make the mortal Atma immortal. Okay, That's the hypothesis. Through some kind of karma, we can make the mortal Atma immortal. Okay, but through some karma, so which kind of karma? Karma can do these 4 things. So let's take each one of these sequentially. The karma, the result of an action obtaining something. What if Atma is mortal? What can you obtain to change that situation? Huh? It doesn't work like that, right? If Atma is inherently mortal, how is obtaining anything going to change the situation? If you are 60 years old, what can you obtain to change that situation? Obtaining isn't going... The age is something inherent in your body, so obtaining something is not. So the first of these 4 options is out. So nothing you can obtain will make a mortal Atma immortal. So then the second option, transformation. So just as you transform milk into yogurt, can we transform a mortal Atma into an immortal Atma? And there we get into some trouble. Several kinds of trouble. One kind of trouble is many scriptures that say Atma is unchanging. If Atma is unchanging, if it's mortal, it'll always be mortal. If it's immortal, it will always be immortal. So there are plenty of scriptural statements that say that Atma is unchanging, therefore not subject to transformation. But then you think, well, set those scriptures aside. Maybe Atma can be changed. Atma is you, your essential nature. Tell me, if your essential nature changes, wouldn't you become someone else? If the essence of who you are changes, you're no longer you, you're somebody else. But we're talking about you. We want to find out what will make you immortal. If you get transformed into something else, it doesn't solve the problem of the mortality of the you that was there in the first place. If A gets changed into B, what about A? This is all about A, not about B. Anyway, this is a kind of logic you find in the commentaries. So transformation is not a possible solution. Then purification. Can we somehow purify Atma? Just as you put water through a filter. I don't know what kind of metaphor you can come up with. As you put water through a filter, can you somehow filter Atma and get rid of impurities? There are plenty of impurities, none of which belong to Atma. Impurities belong to our bodies, impurities belong to our minds, etc. Atma inherently has no impurities. So a process of purification is not going to change Atma. And then finally, destruction. Wait a minute. Destruction of Atma is certainly not going to be helpful. It's like the story that's told. By the way, this is a story that's so old, a joke that's so old, it occurs in Sanskrit commentaries. The joke goes, if you have a headache, one solution is to chop off your head. That actually comes in Sanskrit commentaries. So that's the option of destruction. If Atma is mortal, then get rid of it. It is no good. So anyway, this is the kind of Vedantic analysis that is used to demonstrate that it is logically impossible for any action to make the mortal immortal. And just to put it in some broad terms, immortality is a condition of perfection. immortality, we consider it a condition of perfection. What would it take for the imperfect to become perfect? And here a little bit more reasoning. The imperfect can get better and better and better and better and better. But when will the imperfect lose every last bit of impurity? In science, there's a common example. If you want pure water, they often give this in science. If you have pure water with some impurity in it, the impurity is alcohol, and you want to get rid of that impurity, what do? You distill the water. Every time you distill the water, you get rid of 99% of the alcohol. So you distill the solution, you get rid of 99% of the alcohol. Is there some alcohol left? Yeah. So then you distill it again. You get rid of 99% of the remaining alcohol. Is there still some alcohol left? Yeah. You distill it again. You get rid of 99% of what remains. You get the idea. Each time you distill the solution, you get rid of more and more of the alcohol. When will you end up with chemically pure water? Theoretically, never. The imperfect cannot become perfect. If Atma is mortal, we're finished. There's no solution to the problem, which is why, now you figured it out, which is why Sanatsujata teaches what? Mrityuhu nasti. There is no death. It's just we're not going to see the next verse. Let's just read it, and I just want to show you one thing in the next verse, and we'll wrap up the class. So, back to the long meter. Ube satye kshatriyadya pravritte. Ube satye kshatriyadya pravrit moho mrityu sammato yah kavinam. Moho mrityu sammato yah kavinam. Pramaram vai mrityumaham bravimi. Pramaram vai mrityumaham bravimi. Sada pramaram amritatvam bravimi. Sada pramaram amritatvam bravimi. In the third line, he says, Aham bravimi. Sanatsujata says, I say. What do I say? Mrityuhu pramadam vai. Pramada means a mistake, an error. He says death is an error in thinking, an error in judgment. Previously he said mrityuhu nasti. There is no such thing as death. If you think there is death, it's due to pramada, due to an error in thinking, due to a wrong judgment, or to use our word, the word we use all the time, due to ignorance, due to ajnana, due to avidya. This is Sanatsujata's Vedantic teaching, and we'll see this when we continue in our next class. Okay, some closing announcements. Tomorrow, Sunday, we have our program for children at 11 o'clock. At 5 p.m., our usual mindful movement and meditation session. At 6:15, we have something special, getting ready for Mahashivaratri. We'll have a session of chanting and mantras all on Shiva. So a very meditative session of chanting and mantras dedicated to Shiva tomorrow at 6:15. I said we will celebrate Mahashivaratri next Saturday. So the program will begin at 11 o'clock. With some puja abhishekam. You'll all be invited to participate. We'll be chanting Om Namah Shivaya. Then I'll have a discourse to share with you on the occasion, after which we'll have arati and prasad. If you're coming, you can sign up on the sheet to bring a dish of food. I mentioned last week our website is down. It's partially restored. So if some material you're looking for is not accessible, be patient another week or two and it should all be back. The library will be open after class and we'll conclude with our prayers. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya Om Shanti 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 Om Tat Sat.